Ideas are a dime a dozen. It's execution that matters. And so be very execution focused and just, go in there and build something awesome. Decide who you are and what you're building, and just don't give up on it.
The AI Space podcast, where we strive to encourage and empower AI founders, innovators, technologists, startups, and businesses to drive innovation and scale their initiatives with game-changing insights. I'm your host, Sanjay Kalluvilayil, CEO and founder of Stonehaas Advisors, a consultancy dedicated to helping leaders struggling with customer acquisition, growing revenues, cash flows, to create value and maximize valuations to fund growth, successful capital raises, and/or strategic exits. This is our 12th episode, and we're thrilled to have Greg Michaelson, co-founder and CPO, Chief Product Officer of Zurv. Greg is instrumental in shaping the company's product strategy and addressing the challenges in data science tooling landscape. Zurv is a company focusing on developing next-generation tools for data science and large language models, LLMs. It's also a software development company specializing in data science and AI development platforms. Zurv aims to simplify the complexities of data science and AI projects by providing a unified platform that enhances collaboration, scalability, and deployment efficiency. It raised a seed round of $7.6 million in October 2024, led by Paladin Capital Group, with the participation from Elfstone and other investors. So in this agenda, like always, we've added actually one thing to make sure we talk about strategy and mindset. We got folks like Greg here because we want to know what does it take to be a successful entrepreneur, startup, or business, especially in the AI landscape. Technology architecture, how to architect and integrate AI into your technology stack. Business scaling, what are cost-effective strategies to seed and grow your business? Ethical and responsible AI, how to balance innovation and accountability. AI democratization, how can we broaden access, empower others, and encourage unique perspectives? Encouragement, last, we'll end with some final insights from Greg, thoughts and words of encouragement for those that are grinding it each day to build a viable business or AI initiative. And the ultimate goal, we hope you gain a wealth of game-changing insights to grow, transform, and scale your business initiatives and society to new levels and dimensions, leveraging AI. So, Greg, welcome here on the AI Space podcast. We kind of just dive in and focus on some and try to highlight some game-changing insights that drive innovation and scale businesses. What do you see as maybe 2 or 3 hottest trends in AI for 2025?
The agent stuff is really, really interesting. How technical are your listeners typically?
I think we have a wide range of folks, and we just try to make sure that we talk to it, but can make it understandable, but go deep enough where the technologists don't think it's too fluffy, right?
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, the LLMs are remarkable. I went out and I was at Home Depot last week, and I saw a guy selling strawberries on the side of the road, and I bought some strawberries, way too many strawberries. And I ended up jumping on ChatGPT and asking for some strawberry recipes, and they actually turned out amazing. So apparently ChatGPT is a good cook here. So all the LLM stuff is remarkable. It's gotten into images, to videos, to audio stuff. The place where we're focused at Zurb is on generating code, right? So we're a fully agent powered development environment for doing data science type stuff. So the AI agent that we're about to release is pretty remarkable. It'll write code for you. It'll run your code. It'll test it. It creates a plan and then runs that plan by you and so on. So that stuff is truly interesting. I ordered a device the other day that you wear and it records your stuff. And then at the end of the day, it sends you like a summary of your day and action items and stuff like that. I think that's something that's really interesting that's going to be happening. I've seen a number of recorders, like Fathom is the kind of the oldest one in terms of like recording business meetings and then sending out summaries and stuff like that. Those are going to certainly become more ubiquitous as the technology gets better and better. I hope to see the open source models get a lot better than they have been, because at the moment ChatGPT just blows everyone away. It's no contest really between the closed source and the open source models. So I hope that the open source models will kind of surge, and we'll start to see those sort of take the limelight a little bit more. But I don't know on that front.
Yeah, no, that's great. I really appreciate those perspectives. So, we talk about trends, but what insights have you seen in the last year that founders or businesses are using to scale up their business?
Well, I mean, it's still a grind, right? Everything is sales, it turns out. Everything it boils down to sales. The funding market is super tight. And so trying to get funding is nothing like it was in the 2010s. And so it's really important to know who your customer is, who you're trying to sell to, what your messaging is, what your unique value add is, those kinds of things. So those things are critically important.
No, I agree with you. I'm talking to some AI founders right now, and as they're trying to get scale up their business or even launch their business, the long pole in the tent is product market fit, customer acquisition. How do I get to my clients? Do I have a message that resonates with them? Am I really solving a problem? I think those are the things that need to be articulated, right?
Yeah, it's become so easy to develop software. Well, it's never easy to develop software, but the coding assistants have become so good that it's easy to bolt on AI to an existing product. It's easy to kind of like throw stuff out there. And whereas in 2015, it would be you'd go out and get $10 million to build whatever it is that you wanted to build. Now there needs to be a lot more evidence that there's actually a there for the products that are being developed.
Hey, folks, exciting news. DataCamp, one of the world's top AI and data science learning platforms, is exploring a partnership with the AI Space podcast. We not only bring you game changing insights, we now offer you training and certifications that can truly level up your career and life path. So, whether if you're an individual seeking to level up and secure a new role in AI, a founder or technologist seeking to scale up your AI expertise in architecture, or an enterprise leveling up your team for upcoming AI initiatives, Data Camp delivers unique user experiences so that you can learn data and AI through interactive hands-on coding from home or anywhere. Follow career and skill tracks that take you from beginner to job ready. Work on real-world projects and build a portfolio that stands out. Earn certifications recognized by Databricks, Microsoft, AWS, and other leading companies. DataCamp's new Associate AI Engineer for Developers track is live. You'll build production-ready AI systems using OpenAI, Hugging Face, LangChain, and Pinecone. You'll also learn to ship chatbots, semantic search, and recommendation engines with real-world LLM ops. So if you're seeking to build with the latest AI developer tools, developing AI applications is also live. So make sure to use affiliate links in the episode description below to sign up for DataCamp and start building your AI advantage today. Yeah, no, definitely. Before we continue with this conversation with Greg, I want to make sure that everyone likes, comments, subscribes to the AI Space podcast. Definitely smash that subscribe button, sign up for the notifications. So that helps us to grow the show and have more impressive guests like Greg. So Greg, we've talked about AI a little bit, but let's take a step back. Could you tell us a little bit more about your background and how you got here? What led you into this foray into AI and your path to Zerv?
Well, my career, I actually started my career as a Baptist preacher. Uh, so I don't know if you can classify that as a career. Um, Before that, I started as pre-med, but it turns out I faint at the sight of blood, which is not it's contraindicated for doctors. So yeah, I was a Baptist preacher for about 10 years. Turns out that's not how I want to spend my life. So it was a fun gig. I thought it was going to be more, teaching and studying and that sort of thing. Turns out it's a PR gig, trying to convince people to do stuff they don't want to do. And so I went back to school, got a PhD in applied statistics from the University of Alabama, and worked in the financial sector. I was at Regions Financial when the economy collapsed in 2000, the mid 2000s, the housing collapse. I mean, and I had stayed there for a little over a year, but I was worried that I would come in and the FDIC would be sitting at my desk because that was a hard time for banks at the moment. And so I ended up moving to a company called Travelers, an insurance company based in the Northeast. And I was there for a few years. That's where I met Jeremy Achen, who was the founder of DataRobot. And so I was an early joiner at DataRobot, the inventor of automated machine learning. And I was there for 7 years. I left as their chief customer officer. So I had a few hundred folks that were reporting to me that were responsible for the success of our customers globally. And that was a wild experience. The last thing we worked on there was working for the U.S. government to forecast the spread of COVID to help with the vaccine trials, which is a really interesting project that I think was actually turned out to be really important for the virus, the pandemic response, and the vaccine development and all that stuff. So I left DataRobot in 2020, late 2020, I think, and kind of looked around for my next thing and met a couple of guys from Ireland who were talking about working on building a tool for the experts, and that really resonated with me. So it turns out that the 2010s, the big story of the 2010s was low code, no code. Everything was low code, no code. Anybody can be a data scientist. Anybody can build AI. And I think largely the story of the late 2010s is that the emperor's got no clothes on that one. It's that those tools don't typically work for real problems. Like, for example, with the COVID project that we worked on for the U.S. government, we didn't use DataRobot for any of it. We wrote all of it from scratch because low code, no code tools don't work. Um, so, um, so when I met these two fellas from Ireland, Philly and Jason, we sort of agreed on that premise that the only people that are actually generating value from data today are experts, people who are doing it with code. And so we set out to build a platform that was, we call it the OS for AI. It's basically a place to not only develop AI code, not just interacting with large language models or having a playground to build stuff in, but also a deployment environment and super stability with all the hosting and infrastructure and all that stuff sort of wrapped into it. So that's what we're focused on now, is building for the experts. We don't really target a particular industry or type of company. Our users are, we call them code first data users. So these are people that are interacting with data using code. And they do that in Python. They might use R. They might be SQL coders. And so Zerg gives a cloud-based, collaborative, interactive environment for developing AI and also for deploying and maintaining and monitoring it.
No, that's great. And obviously, this is not we're not showing any demos or anything like that. But so say someone want to use your model, maybe you can like describe what does it do? Does it have like workflows? Are you adding nodes and connecting them, etc. Right?
Really, if you're doing data science today, you've really got two options as far as tools in a preserve world. One is, well, I suppose three options. The third option is buy something like Databricks, which ends up being really kind of focused on structured large scale data and also being really expensive. There's lots of, data IQ is out there. These are sort of the old guard kind of environments that are developed before, like pre-large language model, that are struggling now to bolt on these newer, better technologies. So that's one option. We sort of dismissed that one out of hand. The second one are uh, notebooks. So like a Jupyter notebook type environment. Jupyter is an open source project that was developed at, I think, Berkeley, like 30 years ago or something, by an academic, and it was really made to be a classroom scratchpad, right? But it turns out it's really useful for interacting with data in Python or R, uh, and it gives you sort of like that interactive capability for doing data exploration. Of course, the drawback with notebooks is that they're not productionizable, right? So you can build prototypes, but at the end of the day, you're going to have to hand that to an engineer. And that engineer is working in the second option, like a VS Code or a PyCharm or something like that. The standard development environment, like an IDE.
I guess people use the notebook or Google Colab now too, right?
Oh yeah, Colab is awful though. It's so funny that Colab has it sort of implies by its name that it's a collaborative environment, and it is cloud hosted. But anyone who's ever tried to actually use it collaboratively It's sort of a nightmare. There's like a 10-second lag in everything that runs, and you have to do all this weird cell locking stuff in order to make it work. Because the thing about notebooks, and they're all the notebook environments that are out there are just clones of Jupyter with bells and whistles added onto them.
With a cloud-based model on the back end or what have you, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And then, yeah, there's takes some time it takes quite a bit of time for the you put the code in and for it to process and actually run and try to debug it. Sometimes there's some challenges too, right?
Well, and notebooks are super sensitive to how often you run cells and what order you run them in and that sort of thing because they have this
Yeah, if you're out of sequence,
yes.
yeah, oh, then you gotta.
But if you've got 5 folks in there and they're all running code, or they all have the capability of running code, then you run into those kinds of problems all the time. So the collaborative, that's one of the things we really fix. Though if you when you use something like Zerv, you get sort of a Google Docs like experience where you can have multiple people in and you can see what they're doing in real time, like with WebSockets and all that, that sort of thing. But you don't run into clashes like that because of the way we have our architecture set up. I was just going to say the other option is VS Code, and that's what your engineers will use. So typically, a data scientist will build something in Jupyter, and then they'll hand it off to an actual software developer who will copy paste it into VS Code and have to like scriptify it and build tests and all that stuff in order to get it to be production grade. Which is a bottleneck and a benchmark and a bottleneck and a dependency and all that stuff.
Yeah, no, you're right. And then, like, if you have 100 lines of code and then you rerun the code from line 13, right? You're assuming 1 through 12 was correct, and you run 13, or then you change some sequence, right? You can really hash up your output, right? Or it gets locked up. And then, also for our users that are out there, audience that are out there, recently I was working with Comfy UI, right? So in there you add a node or a checkpoint, and then you can decide which model you're going to use, and then you add different things where you can load it. This is more for creating images, like um, you can load the image, you can load different nodes and different components, right? So if someone wants to do a no code version with you, so how does that layout kind of work out for you in terms of being able to build that out for someone to use?
I don't think I'm. Tell me again. What do you mean by like a no code environment? Or I didn't exactly follow that question.
I guess how for someone, say that for the folks that wanna use your product, how would they actually use it? Like, to build out.
Sure. So uh, it's a coding environment. So they might start with a notebook if they had an existing project. You can drag in a notebook into Zerb and it'll parse it. But Zerb is graph based, so your code is written in nodes on a graph, and so each node runs serverlessly. So you're not paying for compute unless you're actually thinking. But so let's say we start on our first node and maybe we read in a data set from a CSV file into a pandas data frame or something like that. You execute that code. And so what happens when I click run is that we automatically spin up a Lambda or a Fargate container or something, depending on what your settings look like, or a GPU or whatever, and execute that code. And then at the end of that execution, the memory space of that server is serialized and cached and stored on disk. And so every stage of your process, it's basically a checkpoint where you can see what the data looks like. You can see exactly what's happening, and then the data that gets serialized gets passed downstream to the subsequent blocks. And so you might take that first block and you might, put 3 or 4 blocks connected to it. Maybe one of them's going to do some EDA. Maybe one of them will do some clustering. Maybe one will ask a question about the data to a large language model. Maybe one will train a random forest, whatever. And all 4 of those could run in parallel because remember, the compute is serverless and they're receiving the data from that first block. And so you can run as many blocks simultaneously as you want. And then each one just passes its information, its variables and stuff downstream.
Yeah, no, that's an important point because I think I was using a cloud-based tool, and you can choose between CPU and GPU, and even while you're sitting there, you could be ticking off pennies from your credit, right? And you gotta be very careful. If you're just sitting there, you could walk away for 5 minutes and you lost a dollar or 2 maybe, or, a couple cents here and there, and that so how did so you kind of mitigate some of that in terms of cost for the end user?
Right, because we're serverless, none of the compute actually spins unless the code is actually executing. So we're designed to be self-hosted. So all of our users, outside of our free tier, all of our users use Zerv in their own environment. So it's like a 6-minute install. If you're on AWS, for example, it's on the marketplace. It's real easy to get to. But a few clicks, 6 minutes later, you're installed and up and running. And we work just like somebody like Databricks would. We've got a control plane that handles orchestration, and then all the compute and all the storage and everything stays in the user's cloud, which is really important for any kind of analysis or anything like that.
So I think that's an important nuance there in terms of it is a self-hosted model. So the end user or the company is really controlling their data and managing it on their platforms. And then when they need the storage, cloud, compute, etc., then they can access some of those components from your company. Very good. So let's go to I want to make sure as this we are working with people that are trying to build out their business, etc. Let's talk a little bit about strategy and mindset, right? You're co-founder, chief product officer. So talk to us a little bit about what is that strategy and mindset of to an entrepreneur. A lot of people have dreams. People say just dream and things. If you just dreams, nothing will happen. You have to take action. So how did you make what's your advice to those in terms of strategy and mindset to make your dream into a reality, right?
Yeah, there's no substitute for just working hard. And so, uh, also, this hybrid working environment is difficult. I don't know what you guys' experience is with it, but our team is kind of spread out all across the world. We have a hub in Ireland. We've got a few folks in the U.S., some in Canada, some in India, some in London. So it's a very spread out team, but there's no substitute for just like putting your nose to the grindstone and actually building something. It's getting easier and easier to build a prototype. And in the earlier you could build a prototype and it would sort of like fund itself and so on. But now you've got to balance things like here, okay, I've got a prototype, but now I'm also worried about go to market, and I'm thinking about like what kind of revenue can I talk about, and where are my projections, and all that kind of stuff. So build, absolutely build. We found as we were going that we sort of learned as we went. And so I remember our first kind of breakthrough meeting. It was me and Philly and Jason, the three co-founders. And then we had our head of engineering there. We were sitting at a conference table, uh, talking about, we were explaining to our head of engineering how notebooks worked. Which, if you think about it from a software engineering perspective, the way that notebooks actually work is crazy. It's a weird way to work, and data scientists just sort of accept it. We call it data science Stockholm syndrome, because we're sort of like decided collectively that that's the way stuff should go. But a notebook is wild. Like you run a line of code and it updates all your variables and just holds them in memory until you run the next line of code. And it kind of doesn't matter like what order you put it in the notebook. It's really all about how you run it. And our head of engineering was like, this cannot be the way that it works. That would be completely unstable and really unusable. And we were like, nope, that's how it works. And so we were like, okay, we can fix that. That is a problem that we can fix. And so that's how we got to our stateful model, and that's how our architecture got defined and all that sort of thing. But we also were building a ton of features that we ended up not really, didn't really fit our vision. So we've certainly found that there's a lot of value in working hard and iterating and then failing fast, right? Like if we tried to build, some sort of a template based automated machine learning type thing, and then by the time we got halfway through it, we were like, this doesn't really fit what we're building. You know what I mean? So you got to have a balance, I think, between failing fast and having a vision and knowing who you are and what you're trying to accomplish. But a lot of people get paralyzed trying to figure out, what's the exact right thing and the exact right idea and the exact right customer. And until I know that, I can't really start. Yeah, that's the wrong way to kind of get going.
And I think it's very important because you got to translate that dream, but then you have to be a little bit more laser focused, and you have to have a clear vision. And then I think what you said in there is like you have a vision of where this wants to be. You have to put a sandbox or a line around it and say, as I'm building, does it fit into this, right? And the things that you can be perfect, but build out, right? Um, Trim where you need to trim, and and the essence is moving forward, building and moving forward and learning, right? And what we say on here is like, what I like to say is the right result. If when you focus on the right actions, you'll get the right results. So a lot of times people want the results, but don't take the actions. And when you do that, you're able to remove emotions like fear and false hope. Oh, I hope this is going to work out, right? You just got to keep moving forward. You're going to fall, you're going to stumble, you got to get back up and learn, right? So I think that's great what you said there. So the next stage is as there's you get past that, right? It looks like you got some seed funding, etc. That's pretty high level of seed funding. Sometimes that's like a maybe for a Series A or a B for some folks, but talk us through how you got to seed funding and the mindset and what that took. There's some folks out there maybe in that stage and need some guidance in that, right?
Yeah, we've actually had two rounds. We did a pre-seed round that was somewhere around 4 million, and then we did a seed round that was a little over 7. So we've raised around $12 million, 12 million euros to date, which has been surprisingly challenging. The VC space is really wild. I mean, DataRobot was VC funded, and I think by the time I left, they'd raised about $1 billion. So money was really, really available and accessible back then, and nobody was really asking questions about, um, profitability or anything like that. It was all about growth at all costs. And it's not really like that now. So, our first round, our pre-seed round, we kissed a lot of frogs. That's sort of like the way it works with working with the VCs. We actually started out trying to bootstrap. So we did a fair bit of consulting to try and fund the business when we were really small. One of the first early projects that we worked on was building a two-legged cow weighing scale, which was really interesting. Or, well, we didn't build the scale. We worked with a company who was trying to build it. But the idea is that if you're a farmer, a cattle rancher, then if you could weigh your cattle regularly, you could find growth problems or health problems with cows, and that could be a significant improvement to your overall efficiency, right? You could get the right cows looked at the right time. But the problem is getting a cow to stand on a scale is not a straightforward thing to do. And so this company had the idea to uh, have a platform at the watering trough that the cows would have to step up on, but it was only their front two legs. And so the question was, can you build a machine learning model to predict how much a cow weighs based on how much it weighs when it's standing with its front two legs at a watering trough? And it turns out it's pretty easy to do that. About 60% of the cow's weight is on its front legs, give or take. So anyway, it's a little more complicated than that. But like I said, we started doing projects like that to sort of bootstrap and fund the business. But then we quickly realized that we wanted to go.
There you go. It's like when you first said that, I was like, how many two-legged cows are there? Then I thought about it for like a couple seconds. Okay, I was like, do they get maimed or whatever? Then I realized, oh, they're trying to. Then before you got to that, they're trying to wait on two legs.
Yes. Yeah. No, I'm totally with you.
Yeah. So you
Yeah, it's
from
hard.
there you moved on to
Yeah,
three
it's
three-legged
when
cows.
when they only have two legs, it's hard for them to move around. Sorry, I couldn't resist. Yeah, so then we went, like I said, after we decided to go for the VC funding, because we really just wanted to move faster. We were getting good signals from the market that we were building something that was resonating with folks, and we wanted to go faster. So we went out and we talked with tons and tons of VCs. There's so many. I mean, just having founder or co-founder in your LinkedIn will get you, dozens a day, dozens of outreach a day from associates in the VCs trying to set up a meeting or punch their card or whatever it is. And with the funding market kind of tightening up pretty significantly, those people still have to go talk to folks. So there's a lot of time wasters out there in the VC space, and so you got to really be careful about taking go figuring out which VCs you want to talk to, which ones are a really, really good fit where there's like mutual value that can be produced, and then not being sort of like engulfed by the giant tidal wave of associates trying to set up introductory pitches, so that they can decide whether or not they might want to introduce you to a partner or something like that. So I mean, there's a lot to be said for like being choosy and knowing what you want and having a good network in that space for finding funding. So yeah, we raised that round of funding. We're sort of deep tech. Like we had to build a lot of core technology in order to get this thing to work in terms of like serverless and a lot of the newer technologies as it came to the cloud, all the infrastructure stuff, that sort of thing. So we actually got accepted into Intel's Ignite program, which is their startup accelerator in Europe. And there were a handful of companies that got in out of 3 or 4 thousand that applied. So we felt really honored to be a part of that program. And so that was really helpful. We met a lot of people there. In fact, we actually hired few people out of that program when they ended up shutting it down or scaling it back or whatever they did over at Intel. But that was a really good experience. We learned a lot about kind of how to talk about Zerv and what the funding space was looking like, and met a lot of really cool people. So I definitely am a big fan of the accelerators. And then of course we went out and at that point had launched a product, had a handful of customers that we'd brought on. And then that those conversations as startups get bigger, the conversation becomes much more about revenue and numbers and targets and stuff like that, and much less about who the founders are and what the prototype looks like. So, of course, that's the pitch. That's why folks don't get to Series A, is they can't find the revenue. And so that's the road we're on right now, is just going out and selling, going out and talking to users and finding out what they need and making sure that what we're building matches that and building that business.
I think one thing we also talk about product market fit, but I think some people forget when they're chasing money. It's like you got to figure out the company VC fit. Are they the right from your company culture and your vision? Does that VC partner, do they match it? Are they actually going to be contributing, or are they just cutting a check and disappearing? Those types of things. And then that leads to the next section is like, yeah, it's great if somebody cuts you a $10 million check, but the next question is, are you going to burn through that check, or do you actually have the ability to get to revenue? So what's your approach to revenues in terms of, you know, um, going forward, right?
Well, the most important thing, of course, I'm very product focused, just because that's kind of like where I spend my time in the organization. So to me, the most important thing is having a product that people actually need, and that, solves some value problem that they've got. For Zerv, it's a bit of an interesting situation because people like things like Jupyter and VS Code, and they've sort of like developers have kind of built they've been building in those tools for a long, long time, and not everyone realizes that they're sort of old guard tools that have not sort of like developed with the technology that's out there. When we were working on that COVID project at DataRobot, at a very nimble, cutting edge startup, well, kind of a later stage startup, but still very nimble and still very motivated to move as quickly as we possibly could. It took us ages to get our stack set up. Like I said, we had to code everything up. And so we were taking, like daily feeds of state data from every state and cleaning it and, merging it all together and warehousing it. And then we had a bunch of analysts writing code on top of that, building the big simulation and then writing, but the stack we were using was crazy. Like we were working off of local Jupyter notebooks, just because we wanted to move fast, and it was hard to get that infrastructure set up. Like there's no good platform out there for writing code to interact with data. And so, the product stuff is real important. And so kind of, the way that we're talking about Zerv and the way that we're sort of going out to the market is like pointing out, how much time people spend on setup and on infrastructure, and how much time people lose with handoffs, and how costly it is, both in terms of, compute costs, but also in terms of people costs and time costs and opportunity costs and all that sort of thing. If it takes you 9 months or a year to get some AI product out there into the market, when you could do it in 6 weeks, what's the actual cost of that? Sure, you did it in an open source tool, and you didn't have to buy a platform or something like that, but the total cost of ownership is significant in terms of supporting open source, in terms of the risk associated with local development, in terms of, the time lost in terms of handoffs and things like that. So, that's kind of the conversations that we're having about this market.
Yeah, for those who are kind of getting started out, you said you're a chief product officer. Maybe you can explain for some of the young folks out there what exactly a chief product officer is, and what your role is, and maybe what your mandate is, right?
Yeah, I don't know how well defined the terms are really at an early stage startup.
Or at least how it's defined in your role. How about that?
Yeah. At an early stage startup, everyone does everything. And that's how it is. Everybody's got a pick in their hand and a shovel in the other. So, that's just the nature of the beast. Me, I'm focused on a lot of customer facing stuff, a lot of content like technical marketing content. I'm also focused on roadmap and like what are the key features that we need to build in order to sort of be best and the best that we could be at the product that we're trying to build. That sort of stuff. So that's where my focus is.
Yeah, I think one key thing you said is interaction with the clients. At least you're not in the dungeon being a mad scientist or an IV tower trying to conjure up a new product. It seems like you're trying to interact with the clients, making sure that you're solving a problem, but also the features align with what they actually need, right?
Yeah, exactly. And most people, when you talk to most people about their stack, they sort of look at their feet and they're like, they hem and haw a little bit and they say, "Hey, we're really just getting started, and we're not very advanced." Nobody's very advanced at this point. Like everybody's still sort of like embarrassed about how their stack is set up and what they're trying to do with AI and so on. And there's no shame in that. So we're just trying to get in and you know work with customers, work with our users, help them accomplish what it is that they're trying to accomplish, and then get their stuff out there so that it can actually do what they want it to do.
Yeah, I think you said about the roadmap, the product roadmap. You don't want to deliver things too early or that people don't want to pay for. So there's a timeline in the short term, medium term, long term in terms of the cost and investment to build it out and what actually are people willing to pay for, right? And you mentioned about the stack, which leads us into really our next section is really the technology architecture. So maybe for some of the tech wizards out there trying to craft and build their AI empires, what frameworks or tools do you think are essential for building that next level AI ML architecture and stack? Just from your perspective.
Yeah, it's possible that I'm not the best person to talk about this sort of stuff, but a couple of things that I think are really important in the data space, in the AI space, self-hosting is really, really important. Nobody wants to be sending their data out to somebody else in order to have it analyzed. That's why like Hugging Face is really doing some, they're super popular because you could just go get an open source model, download it and then host it, and you can send all of your prompts in house. You don't have to send them out to a third party. Back when ChatGPT first came out, it turned out Samsung was like copy pasting big chunks of their source code into ChatGPT, and wow, all of a sudden that data is owned by ChatGPT, and Samsung is like, "Ooh, that's not good." So, that self-hosting stuff is really important, but at the same time, the closed source models are so significantly better than the open source models that it's definitely a trade-off between IP like sensitivity and getting good results and stuff like that. Uh, so self-hosting, I think, is certainly something to be thought about. I think that um, in terms of infrastructure and what you use, serverless is really interesting. Cloud cost, compute cost is significant. I'll share an embarrassing anecdote. We started out with a free tier in Zerv, and it wasn't very long before the Bitcoin miners found out, and we had to shut it down because it's just challenging. But the cost of compute is significant. And so, even though you might only pay, a fraction of a cent for a particular computation, when you start doing it at scale, it can be non-trivial. And consumption pricing is actually really interesting. The way I don't know how Databricks prices now, but the way it used to be is that they would charge based on consumption, and they call them Databricks units, and it was basically taking the cost of compute in AWS, say, and just doubling it, and so taking a margin off of compute. I don't. Pricing is a really interesting conversation in this space, because the consumption model is certainly where the hyperscalers have pointed everybody, but it's I'm not sure that's the right lever for for a lot of AI companies. Although that's where OpenAI has ended up, it's where a lot of companies have ended up. So maybe it is. I don't know. We're still trying to sort of like settle in on what the right pricing model looks like. We're at the moment we're very user focused, so we're like a user license type approach for the way we price. But anyway, all that to say, the cost of compute is driving a lot of this, and so technologies that make it possible to limit or make that compute more efficient, I think is are really important.
And I think that's very important to say because, when you're trying to trade off data security, privacy, for a lot of these models, you actually need a pretty powerful PC, at least, or workstation. I have a AI-ish, supposed to be, with a NVIDIA graphic card, 64 GB RAM, etc. The other day, went to Olama and started download a model, and I felt like I was going to date myself. I was like back in the 80s when you're putting an MS-DOS file in, you're in the command line, you're like a video game you're playing, and you're like typing. I typed in, I just did a test. What is blue? And it started like writing each letter at one time. Like, this is going to take forever. Then I appreciated Chat GPT a little bit more. I was like, then you have to actually go get a separate like LM Studio for the GUI, right? So there's a lot of things to be said. Then I was working with some of these graphic model, these where you create images, right? Yeah, it's not so easy, and then people forget when whether it's an LLM or a picture, right? When you type something in, the computer doesn't understand what you're saying. It doesn't speak English or human language, so it has to be converted to computer language. So you have to do you have to tokenize it. So it's basically breaking down each word into components that to be understood, has to be encoded, decoded, embedded, all that kind of stuff, right? And to do all that, there's transactional costs in the cloud that may be pennies on the dollar, but if you're using a heavy large language model, right, that's going to be a lot of cost for a very detailed image, right? There's cost associated. Okay, if you're doing a handful, that's great, but if you're doing thousands or millions of transactions, that adds up fast. And if you look at the burn rate of something like ChatGPT, right, on a daily basis, it's not sustainable for the rest of us without that have access to billions of dollars of capital, right?
Yeah, ChatGPT is really interesting because they've got their like I pay for their $200 a month pro subscription, which seems crazy, um, but it's so useful. Like I use it for everything. Like I went and bought strawberries on the side of the road the other day, and I had too many strawberries, so I asked ChatGPT, what should I make with my strawberries? And it came up with a legit recipe for strawberry muffins that was really, really delicious. So I've gotten to the point where I sort of use it for everything. But the thing about ChatGPT pricing is that if you just use their API and you build your own client, it's way cheaper. Like you can, if you just pay it on a per request basis, it'd be pretty hard to spend $200 a month on ChatGPT requests. So that's, it's the pricing stuff is really interesting.
I think next we're going to get business scaling, but I also want to take a step back and we met actually last month or so in Austin for a data science salon conference. Is like AI ML for enterprises. Anna Anderson was running it. I was invited by one of my previous guests, Anastasia Previous and Ariana Smetana from XLIQ Digital. And I knew we'd connect because usually, the troublemakers sit in the back row, but we were sitting beyond the back row. There's two seats back there, and we were in those two seats, and that's where we connected. So, I definitely knew we would connect just by by that. So, anyways, so I'm glad to have you on the show. I saw that you and Philly met both of you guys, and I saw your demo and some of the things that you were doing. So it's for those of you who haven't seen it, definitely go out to the website and check out some of the capabilities. So the next stage is really the business scaling. So what how are you trying to manage that without introducing more complexity? You have to manage a product roadmap. How do you find a way to scale and mitigate some of that complexity, right, in the business?
Yeah, I think we're in the category of like figuring out that the answer to that question. And I don't guess any business ever really gets to the point where they're like, oh, okay, we know the answer. Like we know how we go get customers, we know how we sell, that kind of thing. Well, we're getting better over time, and everyone does, of course. But really, there are a bunch of different channels that you can go after. One of the places that we've put a quarter down on is conferences. So we're doing a fair number of conferences. Being able to demo to somebody live, show them what it is that we're building, has generated a ton of interest. And so, ever since I think the first conference we went to was back in 2021 when JupyterCon was held in Paris, and we went out to JupyterCon, and no, it was ODSC. It was the ODSC before that, and that's a great conference too, Open Data Science Conference. Uh, so we've been doing conferences for a while now, and the reception that we get and the level of interest that we've been seeing from practitioners and from people who are every day pounding the keyboard and trying to build these products has been tremendous. So conferences is one way that we're definitely working. We're still trying to figure out the inbound stuff. Playing with like ads and pay to click type stuff and things like that. So marketing, we're trying to figure out those kinds of things. But also we have a free tier, or we're relaunching our free tier here in late April. And so that is going to be another place for us to do some product-led growth type stuff, and let just anybody get in there and have a decent number of credits to actually do compute and be able to, build and share and so on. We've got like a gallery where people can share their work and things like that we'll be releasing here in the next few weeks. And so the product-led growth type stuff is also on the radar for how we're getting folks into Zerv.
Cool. Obviously, some of your co-founders are in Ireland. You got folks across the globe, and you're based in.
Northeastern Nevada, near Salt Lake City.
Okay, good. And so, that leads us kind of the next area is really about democratization. So, especially, how do we make AI accessible to people from a variety of industries and experiences and backgrounds, right? How can we kind of bridge this gap?
Um, if you'd have asked me that question in 2015, I would have said that you give them good software and then they don't need to know the details of how to use AI and all that sort of stuff. That certainly was the messaging and the marketing for DataRobot, for Dataiku, for Alteryx and all these others that sort of came out. It was very drag and droppy, very point and clicky. And since then, all of those platforms, without exception, have introduced code-based accessories to their low-code, no-code tools. Because at the end of the day, every problem is complicated. Every problem needs code. 100% of AI projects require code. And so hiring professionals that actually do this sort of work. So you need coders, you need experts. And that's super, super important. Um, so there are lots of tools that can make those experts more useful. Um, certainly the agent-based like code assistants and stuff like that, Copilot and Zerv and Cursor and others that are trying to do some more of that sort of AI-assisted coding. Those are tremendously helpful. But at the end of the day, figuring out, I've seen an awful lot of like doing AI for AI's sake. That results in a lot of sort of disillusionment with those teams and that work. So I would not advise anyone to do AI just to do it. I think the important thing is to find specific valuable use cases that are relevant and pertain to the business that the organization is trying to do. And then sort of like build those. And maybe you build those with consultants at first. Maybe you find an off-the-shelf product that uses AI to do those things, or and so on. But you ease into it, right? You might start with a data team where you've got SQL coders and data engineers and analysts that are doing like dashboards, maybe Power BI or something like that, some old school kind of like basic BI type stuff. And then you sort of like segue that into, a data science team or a team of, even just a handful of coders that are getting in there and building something that's relevant to your business and generating value.
Yeah, I was actually testing something out in terms of building a product for photography tool app, right? And you can go to a free no code tool. So people, I want to make sure we separate fact from fiction, hype from reality. We're talking about agents and no code tools and all these things. Went to no code tool, put in the basic prompt. You go to, you get the prompt, you put it in. If you go beyond that initial prompt, you have to upgrade to the next level because the code can't handle it. Then, okay, got the basic tool, it worked, right? But then if you actually want to customize it, and I said, do these things, whatever, you put in the no code tool, it did it, then it wasn't working. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is not as simple. And I understand basic coding. I'm not a coder at all. And then I said, okay, and fix this one thing. Instead of, a coder can go and fix that one line in the notebook, right? It reran the whole code. And that has cost to it and implications, right? And it just didn't work out. And yeah, then I finally told it, reread the code, analyze it, assess it, debug it, clean it, then rerun the code. Then it did it. And after 2 or 3 iterations, it finally worked. But it was not that there's no easy button. And so there's, like you said, you can't just fire all your programmers and architects and stuff. You need actually intelligent people out there. Yeah, maybe they don't have to do the basic stuff, but it saves some time, but you need some intelligence to actually look at it and say, "This is not going the right direction," or, "I know what needs to be," like a surgeon, "what needs to be fixed to make this work going forward," right?
Yeah, the thing about these LLMs and the code assistants and so on, I've been working on a project lately to use a platform called Weaviate. It's a vector database to store encodings of audio files to build a almost like a chatbot kind of thing, so that it can listen to call center conversations live, and then based on other conversations that have happened, it can recommend a course of action to the call center agent. That kind of thing. That's the thing I've been working on the most lately. But like asking, the more sort of obscure or specific the kind of thing you're trying to do gets, the more likely these models are to hallucinate. So, like just make up functions or, packages or, whatever it is. So I found that the large language models, if they get it right or very close to right the first time, you're good. But if they're sort of struggling on the first go, to like figure out the right thing to do or whatever, then you're going to have a hard time getting usable code out of these guys.
Yeah, and this was actually a no code tool that I was using. So, so in terms of, we always talk about ethical and responsible AI. As you're building out, how can we balance AI innovation and fast time to market with ethical and responsible AI governance and development? What are your thoughts on that?
I like Grok. That's the X one, right? Have you guys used that one? It's like completely unfiltered. Well, maybe not completely unfiltered, but like I think that Elon Musk has the right idea with a lot of this stuff. Is that we get twisted around the axle trying to babysit people, and we build all this crazy stuff into large language models where, if you ask it to generate a picture of the founding fathers, it'll be a group of African American women.
Well, I think was it the Bard that did that for the Nazis or whatever, right? Generate images of Nazis, and it was like a multi-diverse group.
I'm for diversity and all that sort of thing, but like it's sort of like hard coded into some of these models so that they become sort of.
I guess where I'm going with that is more like making sure that in terms of the data security, privacy, those things, the guardrails are in place so that these tools don't go off the rails. You know what I mean?
Yeah, to me that's there's a lot of really interesting things you can do. There's a company called ARCEE out there that's doing small language models.
RC, we just had Julian's episode. He just came. It just came out today, or um, in April. So yeah, yeah.
Nice. No, he's a super guy. They're doing some really interesting stuff. We've built some LLM judges where you have one large language model sort of evaluate the answer from another large language model, um, and use that to kind of like decide what to do. If there's high confidence that it's a good answer, and you've got a couple of different large language models saying the same thing, then maybe that gives you some comfort. We've also seen some cost balancing type stuff. So just trying to decide if it's an easy question or a hard question, and then feeding it to a cheap model compared to an expensive model based on how difficult we think the question is. So there's lots of techniques to kind of balance both the risk of hallucination and bad decisions, but also the costs associated with making these requests and so on.
Yeah, for those that aren't familiar with hallucinations, is when the model makes up answers. I'm sure some of us have done that back in our college and university tests. When there's an answer we didn't know, just I think we've seen a few tests. So the way we like to close out the episode is with some encouragement. You've been building out this space, you've been kind of grinding it. Any concluding thoughts, insights, encouragement to those that are seeking to get in the space or struggling to build their business?
Yeah, just do it, would be what I'd say. I mean, it's real easy to get paralyzed trying to find exactly the right thing. Uh, you know, my advice is do your homework, talk to as many people as you can, and get a very good sense and a good perspective and point of view on the space where you're trying to build. And then once you've done that, once you know the space, and you know the issues, then just build, and as you show it to people and as you go down that road, you'll figure a lot of stuff out. And, it's too easy to get paralyzed. And it's also too easy to worry about ideas. Like, one of the things that I think is a mistake, is worrying about somebody stealing your idea. Because, ideas are a dime a dozen. It's execution that matters. And so be very execution focused and just, go in there and build something awesome. Decide who you are and what you're building, and just don't give up on it.
Yeah, no, that's great advice, because even as I'm getting this podcast, we've just hit some major milestones, past 50K views in a very short time, and I think for 645K impressions on LinkedIn, et cetera. And, other people coming into space, but you can't focus on others. You just got to put the foot on the gas and just keep innovating and moving forward. And that's kind of like what I'm trying to do, is make sure we continue to evolve the podcast, et cetera. Greg, I think we can talk all day about AI and building tools in the space, right? We're coming up on time. Where's the best place for folks to learn more about Zerv or connect with you?
Yeah, Zerv.ai is our website. You can sign up for our free trial and dive in and actually start using it and building stuff using our AI agent, which is fantastic. Join our community, that sort of thing. And if they want to connect with me, I'm on LinkedIn. I accept every invite, or not invite, but every connection request. I have thousands and thousands. I haven't hit the cap yet, though. I think it's 50,000 uh, connections max on LinkedIn. So there's plenty of room left. So you can reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, just a quick summary of the show. We have Greg here from Zerv, Chief Product Officer, co-founder, et cetera. He's talked about the mindset, strategy and mindset of an entrepreneur. Focuses on build, right? Just move forward. We've talked about the business scaling in terms of how to grow the business. We've talked about the technology stack in terms of growing. We talked about democratization, ethical and responsible AI, making sure we have this. I think it's been an exciting episode, a lot of things to learn. So, fantastic. Everyone make sure to check out and connect with Greg. He's open to LinkedIn Connects. I'm definitely open to LinkedIn connections. I'm not stuck up about that, so, and don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn, subscribe to our YouTube channel, make sure you subscribe, sign up for those notifications. You can follow us on your favorite podcast platforms like Spotify, Apple. I learned quite a bit from this episode, and I can't thank you enough, Greg, for sharing your insights with us today. I'm your host, Sanjay Kalluvilayil, CEO and founder of Stonehaas Advisors. I hope you gained a wealth of game-changing insights to grow, transform, and scale to new levels and dimensions leveraging AI. Thanks, everybody. Look forward to the next episode. Take care.